Hi, and welcome to M4G Advocacy Media. You're watching the Journey Series video podcast. My name is Mark. I'm the co-host of Journeys. I'm a brown man with brown eyes, bald, and I've got glasses, a black and white beard. Today I'm wearing a blue shirt, and there's a painting behind me and a shelf with some knickknacks.
Hi, I'm Crystal. I'm a white woman with brown hair and brown eyes. And I have a black and white striped shirt on today. And I have a brown background with a table and a lamp.
And today our guest is joining us from an organization known as Pieces of Me, which he'll tell us more about, and he'll talk to us about his journey and his journey through disability and all of that. Hi, Daniel.
Hi.
Hi, it's great to meet you. And for those who out there like myself who are blind or visually impaired, I am a white man in his late 30s. I've got a dark suit on with a black fedora, black goatee, and dark hair, brown eyes.
Great. Thanks for joining us, Daniel. Just start wherever you feel like. Go back as far as you want.
All right, so I was born with a rare form of retinitis pigmentosa, which is a disease of the retinas. So I am considered legally blind, not a ton of usable vision. And I was also born with a connective tissue disorder called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. The blindness we knew about very early on in my childhood, but despite the fact that I was born with the Ehlers-Danlos as well, we didn't really get a firm diagnosis on that until I was in my early 30s. So my journey has been a mix of gaining adaptive skills and trying to adapt to my environment with circumstances that have become more illuminated over the years, and also one that has been a journey where I learn how to embrace my capabilities and also how to embrace my full identity at various intervals throughout my life, because it's not something I started with. It's not necessarily something that my parents had the tools to help me discover and work through as a kid. And so I spend a lot of my time now taking the gifts and talents that I have and trying to create opportunities for others so that people can fulfill their potential and maybe have a few less obstacles along the way. So I currently run an organization called Pieces of Me Foundation, and we'll talk more about that toward the end of the episode, but I think it's important to note here that we spell pieces P-E-A-C-E-S, so as in like world peace. And we did that to promote the fact that we individuals with disabilities are not broken, and these lies that we hear and sometimes that we even tell ourselves regarding our capability are harmful, but they are addressable. And I got into this work because I've seen both sides of this. I spent the first 18 years of my life in a lot of ways trying to be a broken-sighted person, as you might say. I had enough residual vision that I could read really large print fonts. I could mostly navigate the world without a white cane, although, I occasionally fell into an in-ground swimming pool or walked into a wall, or, didn't really have the skills to cross a lighted intersection by myself. So one could argue I wasn't really succeeding at all. And I had a couple of pivotal moments in my teenage years. One was where we had found a surgeon who thought they could address the vision loss through a surgery. And it was basically my best hope. But not only did the surgery not work on the eye that we operated on, it actually caused the eye to reject the implant. And through a cascading set of events, I had a significant inflammatory attack, which destroyed the rest of the vision in that eye. And that was a turning point for me, because it took away a lot of the realistic expectation that life was just one operation away. And it also set things in motion for me to get introduced to a school for the blind, where I would be introduced to Braille and the white cane and accessible technology for the first time a few months shy of my 18th birthday. And where I would start to say, hey, there's not this barrier here of life is on the other side of gaining more eyesight. Life is on the other side of learning what I can do, embracing who I am, and going forward.
Right.
And so I went off and got my GED because I had missed 5 years of K-12 education, basically full stop. They had tried to do homeschooling with inaccessible materials. We had tried to do some other workarounds, but you might as well say grades 7 through 11 were literally non-existent.
Yeah.
So by the time I started what should have been my 12th grade year, I had the academic knowledge to go get my GED, but I didn't have anywhere close to the high school credits required for graduation.
Yeah.
So I went off and got some training, really got some blindness skills behind me, and started college. But what I learned in college, as the chronic pain started to get worse, and as the chronic anxiety started to get worse, is that as much as I had learned over the last couple of years how to advocate for myself to get accessible materials for blindness, I didn't know how to sit down and have a conversation with those same academic supports to say, hey, I just started this new anti-anxiety or antidepressant medication and I can't lift my head off the pillow. What do we do here? Or, I'm struggling to walk as much as I used to walk because there's an inflammatory attack in my foot. How do we manage this? And so ultimately, 3 years into my undergrad degree, and about halfway through credit-wise, I ended up having to drop out because I just couldn't maintain the academic standards. I couldn't do class effectively and consistently, and I didn't have the tools to go say, hey, this is what's happening. And so I went off, started working. Eventually, my then wife and I had our first child, and we were in Colorado at the time. We knew that because of my wife's or my ex-wife's eye cancer that she had as a child, that 80 children that we had a 50-50 shot of inheriting that same cancer. We had gone through and done the research to know how to handle it, make sure they had a good outcome to the best of our ability. But when it came time for our daughter to be born, rather than helping us set up the referrals to make sure that we were on top of the cancer screening and possible treatments, we had a hospital that was determined that no matter what we did, no matter that the child had nursed successfully or that we had successfully changed all the diapers, all of those other things demonstrated how we could take a temperature, that whole thing.
Mhm.
Nothing that we could do could could convince them that blind parents were capable of safely and effectively parenting a child. And so they ended up holding us in the hospital for an additional 24 hours trying to figure out what to do and get a sighted family member back into the state of Colorado. And then by that point, Child Protection speed us home from the hospital with a referral that simply said parents are blind. There was no other problem cited anywhere in the documentation other than the perception that blind parents could not parent. So, long story short, our daughter did have that same form of cancer that we were concerned about. We got her through it successfully. As a matter of fact, she came through as one of the best cases they had ever treated. And that was despite all of the fears we were navigating, having been, in our minds, betrayed by a system that should have been there to support us, not unduly ridicule us.
Right.
And, you know, I was working graveyard full time at the time. We took care of the baby, and we eventually had 2 more children, one of whom also had the cancer, and we successfully had him treated as well. Again, terrific outcome. But and in that same time, I found another university that was online and self-paced that I went back and graduated with my bachelor's through some hurdles, through some surgeries, through a lot of pain and mental health struggle, but I got there. And fast forward to 2017, when I'm about 2 months post-op having my hip and femur worked on. And I'm in the process of trying to find some employment, trying to get on my feet, having recently been divorced, and trying to just get everything together. And 2 mentors that I had been working with who did not know each other came to me within 48 hours of one another and said, you know, you're smart, you're a great advocate, you're articulate. Why would you not consider going to law school? And I said, well, I don't know that I'm smart enough. I don't know about getting accommodations there. I don't know that I can afford it. And my academic record and the chronic pain and the mental health and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
And they said, you know, just think about it, pray about it, see what happens. And I did. And I took the first steps, dipped my toe into the water. And a year later, I was in law school. The following summer, after my first year of law school, I had seen multiple people that I cared about fall through the system where they had not gotten the care or the treatment or the support they were needing. And this was just a compounding thing based on everything I had been through, based on everything my kids had been through. And as I was talking to my cousin, she was telling me the story of her daughter who was born with an unexpected limb difference, and how when that happened, they had not gotten any support either. And so I said, you know, Christy, this is an absolutely ridiculous idea on the surface, but I have some thoughts as to how we can fix this. I think we can do something powerful here. Are you interested in starting a nonprofit with me? And she said, you know, I guess so, yeah. And, you know, the running joke is 4 years later, probably hasn't forgiven me for it yet, but here we are.
That's awesome. There's so much going on in different disability everywhere, you know, where disability is looked down on, and so many people are, you know, not treated correctly and stuff like that. And, you know, we have to work much harder to change perceptions and make a better world for the future generations. And, for anybody going through the court systems, for people to be accountable for the situations that they helped happen to enable them.
Absolutely. And there's a couple of dual issues there as well. You have on some circles where we're not really considered to be part of the broader diversity, equity, and inclusion paradigm, even though we ought to be. Our minority has experienced, we'll just say, more than enough to fall into that conversation. And then above and beyond that, there's a fundamental misperception out there regarding what degree of struggles we face that are intrinsic to our disabilities and what amount that we face that is a byproduct of either misconstrued expectations or ableism or systemic problems, structural problems, etc. And so when I explain it to people, I said, most people would assume that 80% of the problems I face as a blind person are by virtue of the vision loss, and the other 20 is, man-made. And I said, actually, in my world, it's the opposite. Yeah. And when I tell that to people, almost everyone I've told that to has just been shocked. And they're like, well, we never would have guessed that. I said, okay, so let's talk about this more. And by the way, the fact that 80% is systemic, structural, stigma, whatever, that's really, really good news, because that's fixable. We can address that. We can change that.
And I know the idea that it's going to happen overnight, we are very aware that that's not going to be a thing. As a disability community, we know that's not possible.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you have to start somewhere. You have to speak up. You have to talk about these issues.
And what I've learned over the last probably year, as I've done some work with pieces and gone out doing a lot of outreach to the business community, is sometimes that first step is to set aside our own assumptions regarding who is creating these barriers and why, and meet people where they are and learn what they do know, what they don't know, what their intentions are. Right. And 9 times out of 10, we're going to be really surprised.
That's why we're so glad you're a guest. We've had some other really awesome guests, and it's because people like you are on that same trajectory that we're on, where we have to meet people where they are and explain to them the issues and say, here's the issue. Are you going to help us fix it? Or are you going to stay on the same trajectory and, the world's going to continue to fall apart? The issues. Exactly.
And are we going to continue to call people out, or are we going to call people in? Are we just going to point our fingers and expect them to know what to do on their own under more and more ridicule? Or are we going to say, look, we don't accept that this has to be this way, nor do we accept that our reality is as it should be, but we're willing to help you and work with you as we co-create the world that we all really and truly want to have. Right.
I mean, a lot of people would say that me or the whole disability community saying that how I feel about things is threatening. But no, I'm not threatening anything. I want to meet you where you're at and try to work with you to make it better,
Well, and the idea of threatening, I think goes back to this scarcity mindset that we've kind of fallen into regarding particularly access and inclusion, where the elephant in the room has always been this notion that if you're providing greater access, that means it's costing money, so you have to take that money out of some other bucket. Or if you're providing inclusion, then whose seat are you giving away in order to accommodate us? And those are just fundamentally the wrong questions. They're valid questions based on the wrong paradigm. The right paradigm is saying, wait a minute, if there's greater access, there's greater capacity for us to contribute, for us to participate and exercise our gifts and talents. That's a cost. That's a boon. That's not a cost.
Exactly.
If there's greater inclusion, it's not just us receiving. There's opportunities that we are creating as the doors open. We're leading. We're growing things. We're creating things for others, both with and without disabilities. And if we understand that, then we look at the question of how much access, how much inclusion, and ask yourself, well, if you could buy, or if somebody was going to hand you stock and pick your favorite company, would you really ask, well, how much do I have to take? Or would you say, hey, I'll take what you're willing to give me and I'm going to go grow it and we're going to all be prosperous. It's that same kind of mindset that's going to get us to where we need to go.
Right.
So what is the biggest obstacle that you've found trying to navigate the world, and the biggest, I guess, bias that you've had to, or the most common thing that you encounter?
I think fear is the biggest one. I think within myself, I think fear, sometimes of pain, sometimes anxiety, sometimes fear of finding that next level, although that shouldn't be the case. You know, we're human, and sometimes we get boxed into our own expectations and limit our own potential. And I think on the external side, fear is again my answer, because the biggest problem I run into advocating is people who genuinely want to know and are equally afraid to ask. They don't want to say the wrong thing. They don't want to be insensitive. In the more extreme scenarios, they don't want to get sued.
Right.
And I get it. I get how conversations that are raw and are foundational often tend to be indelicate because we're trying to find our footing. That's okay. I assume that if somebody books a link, books a time on my calendar, or runs across me in a breakout room and says, hey, tell me more, I default to assuming that their heart's in the right place and that they want to know more for the right reasons. Right. And so there's a tremendous amount of grace and latitude I can offer from that place, because I can help them work through some of the struggles very peacefully, very kindly, and say, look, I think I hear what you're trying to ask. Let's get to the heart of the matter, and then let's build up your confidence to engage in that conversation, because once that's done, the sky's the limit.
Right. That is part of what we want to achieve with this. And this dynamic of the guests we have on, you know, when companies are scared to have that conversation, when they're scared to ask the questions to their own disabled people in their workforce, they can listen to us have a conversation and dialogue, and they can understand the kind of conversations to have and what's appropriate, and maybe it'll make them not so afraid to speak up on how they ask questions.
Absolutely. And, you know, we talk about ending stigma, and that's a laudable goal, but I think sometimes we forget stigma can't truly be eradicated without first establishing open, respectful, and sometimes again raw dialogue.
Mhm. Right. Are you okay, Mark?
Yeah, I'm okay. I'm just kind of stumped for questions right now.
Oh.
So tell us a bit more, Daniel, about Pieces of Me.
So, Pieces of Me is a mostly virtual organization. We've been around for a few years now, and we have a team that's spread throughout the country and, you know, following throughout the world. And the idea was, if you bring together people with diverse experiences and characteristics, so whether they have disabilities or not, or regardless of what kind of disability, bring people together and do real peer-to-peer support where, for instance, if I want to know what kind of resource will help me, I don't know, find a white cane somewhere, I can do a Google search on it. I can try to stumble across a website. I can, heaven forbid, ask a professional, or I can find out what my friends or colleagues or peers are using
Right.
and get so much further. You know, and that's maybe not even the best example. I think even better is when I was really coming to understand Ehlers-Danlos. Yeah, there were some doctors that had some useful advice, and there were websites and webinars that had useful advice, but when it came to really learning how to manage my pain and how to set expectations and really create a life that would still be fulfilling, many of those insights came from my peers, people who were fighting those same battles and carving out those same solutions. And so we want to build, and we're in the process of trying to build, what we call the Wikipedia of disability resources. And much like the regular Wikipedia, it's peer-to-peer. It's taking bits and pieces of what we all know and collating it into a database of knowledge that is unlike anything else that was ever assembled. And we think that by doing the same thing with disability-related resources, we can far eclipse anything that any team could do just by virtue of their own research, because it's going to have our fingerprint on it, and it's going to be dynamic. And so based off of those things, we do education, we, you know, do things in classrooms, and we work with professional organizations to help them understand universal design and inclusion, and just really, again, try to help people have that on-ramp when the conversation starts to feel uncomfortable or daunting. We're there to say, hey, let's get you started on the first step or that first stage, and we'll be there with you as you progress through your understanding. And ultimately, as you find how you can then give back into the community and share your knowledge, your insight, your experience, because everybody has something to give and everybody has something to learn.
Yeah.
And do you work with any corporations or any other organizations, sort of, were maybe predominantly non-disabled, and try and have those conversations with them about how to integrate more with the disabled community?
Absolutely. We haven't had as many of those experiences yet as I was hoping, but that is definitely a priority of ours going forward because, again, those are the conversations where jobs and real equity and financial security and dignity really start to take root.
Mhm. I think that is essential to what we're both trying to do, all of us, is having that foundational projects that we're doing, but then also collaborating with
Yep.
able-bodied people, so that they can understand the topics and they can try to fix, the situations. Not us per se, but the environment in which we have to live in.
Absolutely. And I think that's such a key point because most of our non-disabled peers, to the extent that they're aware of our reality, are generally interested in helping fix it. That desire doesn't have to be created. It's usually already there. What is lacking is a depth of knowledge so that they fully understand the problem and some direction on our part as to actionable steps that they can do to address it. And again, like I was saying earlier, helping them transcend that mindset of scarcity where they think, well, if we create access, it might be the right thing to do, but what opportunity is it limiting? And instead helping them understand that access creates opportunity for everyone, either with or without a disability.
Right.
You mentioned before, I don't remember if it was earlier today or in the pre-interview, but you mentioned that there are some lies out there about that are misconceptions that people have about people with disabilities that are one obstacle that that sort of keep disabled people out of the workforce, let's say as an example. What are some of those biases or lies that you found?
So I think one of the primary ones is there's a fundamental misconception and a fundamental fear regarding what a person with a disability can do. And that varies maybe by virtue of the business sector and by virtue of disability, but there's still a lot of limiting belief as far as what we're capable of. And I think in that case, that's more ignorance, usually innocent ignorance, as opposed to lie. But I think one of the lies out there is that we are better suited being safe, that we're better suited not taking any risks, that we just ought to be conservative with our goals. And that often arises from things such as the medical model, and I'll say it, from Voc Rehab. There's a distinct disinterest when it comes to most Voc Rehab agencies as it relates to helping us take intelligent chances and spread our wings and fly. And there's still this pernicious myth out there that disability automatically equates to diminished quality of life and diminished potential. Oh, I could do so much more if I didn't have this disability. Not necessarily. And I think, again, going back and beating this dead horse, the idea that creating opportunity for us robs somebody else, or that we have to prove ourselves as being superhuman in one capacity to make up for the presence of a disability so very harmful.
And where do you suppose that myth about having to be conservative and having to be safe, where do you suppose that comes from?
So I'm gonna paraphrase a gentleman who appeared on a Pieces of Me webinar last summer. And he very eloquently pointed out that even the term vocational rehabilitation in and of itself is ableist. And to the extent I can remember his quote, he basically explained that vocational, meaning not career, not long-term, not long-term, employment with upward mobility. Vocational basically meaning go out, do something, earn a minimal paycheck. And then rehabilitation, in that same vein, what kind of rehabilitation is there required for being blind? There really isn't. There's a need for maybe coaching. There's a need for mentoring. There's a need for guidance as we navigate a world that wasn't designed for us. But rehabilitation is just purely the wrong word. And so that all comes back to meaning that many of the services that were designed for us were not designed by us, and were not designed with an adequate understanding of what we're capable of and what our true struggles are. And so when you start from that position, it's really hard to dream big when you feel like you're expending all of your efforts just creating a little inkling of opportunity, because the system is so very inefficient, misguided, and just completely construed the wrong way.
I can have a long conversation about that. When it comes to the different disabilities and the kind of rehab that people think is required. I mean, it's necessary, sure, for right after someone is diagnosed with something, or when they're a child or whatever, to have rehab. I get that, but to say someone is behavioral because of that, and to then everyone else that associates that word with what you're capable of as a disabled person, that kind of affects the rest of your life.
Absolutely. And that's not to say that there shouldn't be resources out there. There should be. There definitely should be, both in general and especially for people who, like you said, are transitioning into having a disability. But I think as advocates, it's worthwhile to take a moment and realize what the history of, say, rehab is. And also that it hasn't really changed over the last several decades.
Right.
And it wasn't designed to help people thrive. Certainly not
No.
designed to help people thrive in the 21st century.
It's definitely not meant to help anybody thrive, to maintain the best they can be at that point. Sure, but you're on your own when it comes to if you're going to thrive, if you're going to be more than what they want you to be.
Absolutely. And I think maybe going back to Mark's question then, maybe one of the fundamental lies, and it's not necessarily something that people tell us, but it's almost a pernicious myth that arises from all of the various components here. There's a real lack of belief systemically that people with disabilities can or should thrive. And until we break that, until we can get people understanding that having a disability does not preclude us from having an incredibly fulfilling life filled with love and service and adventure and
Given the right support, yeah, sure.
yeah, all of the other things. Well, and again, and some disabilities require more support than others. Absolutely. And some people without disabilities require more support than others. I think there's a notion out here that having a disability is the cause of needing support. And it may change, it does change the kind of support we need, particularly because we live in a world that was designed for those without disabilities. But I want to emphasize here too, we need support because we are social creatures. We are designed
Everybody
to be,
does.
yeah, we're designed to be interdependent as opposed to completely independent.
Right.
And I think that is sometimes lost in translation.
And what do you think about? I mean, I was thinking there might even be a deeper thing there. Just that there's this sort of perception that if you need support, more support, whether you're disabled or not, it's a bad thing, right? People just generally see if you're not perfect or not impervious to pain or illness, or you're not broken in some way, then that's good.
You know, I was right before we logged on, I was having this thought that I'm going to share here. And I saw a headline about how people are using AI and some of your new chat GPT and other things to write, I think it was restaurant reviews or something to that effect. And as somebody who does a lot of writing for a living, my initial thought was, why would somebody want to do that? And then I thought to myself, okay, but that's based off of my skill set. At the same time, because of some of my pain issues, I may not be able to, sweep the floor as easily as somebody else can. And so, I've been contemplating, man, I wish I could afford to go hire myself a house cleaner again. Not because I am on the whole necessarily less capable than my neighbor, but because my capabilities are different. And I think, and again, this isn't 100% applicable across the board. Every circumstance is different, but there's a lot of emphasis put on what is quote unquote normal support that everybody needs and what is support that's designed for people with disabilities that is special. And even if we don't need some of the normal support that somebody else does, it never quite adds up to canceling out some of the quote special support we need. It's a rigged equation, and it does a number on our self-worth.
For sure.
So what are some of the other projects you're working on, Daniel?
So I am working on, actually at the time of this recording, I have started working on a master's in health leadership, because I want to get further into health equity based on many of my experiences. And I also am doing, some training where I can. I'm working with some companies to help them improve their not only awareness, but etiquette and just some of their processes. And also, where opportunities arise, I do training in classrooms talking about disability rights and disability history. But also, we have a product or service that we call a roundtable, where I bring people into a confidential space, either virtual or physical. And I say, okay, what happens here stays here. I understand this is going to be indelicate, it's going to be raw, but I know you're here to learn. Let's sit down just as people and let's talk about your questions, your fears. What are all the things you want to know about having a disability that you're afraid to ask anywhere else? And this can be with students, it can be with employers, it can be with the general public, in a number of scenarios. And just again, give people a safe place to ask that burning question that they're afraid they're going to get canceled if they ask out loud. And help them understand not only now they have an answer to that burning question, but it's okay to learn. It's okay to be curious, because if you don't do those things, your opinion will never elevate.
So Daniel, how do people get hold of you if they want to find out more about Pieces of Me?
So on LinkedIn, I am Daniel Hodges, JD. That's one of the easier ways to find me. And you can go to Pieces of Me, and again, that's PEACES of me.org. And you'll find a way to book some time to speak with me. You'll find contact information. You'll see the brand new logo that we're rolling out, which is a comma butterfly, which is not as common, but it's a butterfly that appears at first glance to be broken, but actually is exactly how it was meant to be. You'll learn more about our webinars, and there we encourage people, join us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn. Be part of the conversation. And there's opportunities for people to volunteer or to share something else of value. We talk about it, time, talent, or treasure. Even if you don't have a dime to your name, I guarantee you have a gift or some time or something that could add to this work that we're doing. And just, we invite people, whether you're disabled, whether you're an ally, employer, somebody who's not quite sure where you fit into this equation, we have a fervent desire to bring you into the community and help you find a place where you'll fit, where you'll thrive, where you feel like you have found something that you are really excited to be a part of.
We had talked about something during the pre-interview about how whatever disability it is, how it can be an avenue to share your gifts with the world, as opposed to some sort of barrier to success. Did you want to elaborate on that?
Yeah, and I think in my case, a lot of people automatically assume, oh, you're blind, so you must have superhuman hearing. And that's, unfortunately, that hasn't found its way to me yet. But what has happened is I look at the world differently, both obviously literally, but also figuratively. And so I feel like I've been able to get a deeper understanding of how structures and bias impact people, how the conversation regarding disadvantages and potential and work ethic, how those things have kind of been boxed in instead of being a more comprehensive conversation.
Mhm.
And the work that I do, whether it's work through pieces or some of the other side projects I have, are largely based on creating empathy, creating understanding, really helping people see beyond the horizon. And I love that. I love that when I wake up in the morning, I always have something to do that is going to put something positive back out into the world. I love that even when the pain is severe, more often than not, I can focus my attention to something positive and something impactful, and it doesn't make the pain go away, but it does help me maintain equilibrium. So I don't know, none of us really knows what life would be like absent our disabilities, but I do know that I have made a choice and continue to make a choice of choosing to learn from them and choosing to embrace who I am to the fullest extent of my capability as often as I can, as opposed to wondering and pining for what might have been
Right.
and kind of just giving into despair. And that's not to say that every day is easy. It's not. Many days are tough.
Mhm.
Most days it takes a concerted effort. But I want to share that little bit of hope in saying, we have the ability to look at our circumstances and ask, what can we accomplish? What is our next step? And also to say, maybe I didn't reach my goal today, but my effort counted and I have an opportunity to go a little further tomorrow.
Mhm.
Thank you for sharing that, Daniel. That's a very inspiring message. And thanks for taking the time to speak to us today.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure.
I really think we can have a really good conversation again sometime.
Yeah, for sure.
I wish I was feeling better.
I hear you. Hopefully the migraine resolves.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Daniel. Have a good day.
You too. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.